The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Optimum Solutions webinar about payroll information you can share with your employees. My name is Susan Warren, and I'll be your presenter today, and Dina Russell is also with us while we talk to you about some things you can do that may make your life a little easier. Wouldn't it be wonderful if your phone rang less? Wouldn't your life be easier if the employees that you pay understood just a little bit more about payroll so they didn't have to ask you to help them interpret their checks and their W-2s and their PTO hours on their pay stubs? I know for some of you, PTO just created so many questions that you took it completely off your pay stubs, hoping out of sight would mean out of mind and they would quit asking. Now, we're not going to offer you any legal or tax advice today because we're not lawyers or tax advisors, but we are common sense payroll professionals, and we've put together an agenda today with some ideas that you can incorporate in lots of different areas. From your onboarding of new hires to information you can keep handy when life change events happen. We'll look at introducing new hires to how your company does payroll. This may be their first job ever, and they have no clue about payroll, or it may be their 100th job, but you probably do payroll differently than their other employers did. Have you ever tried to explain gross to net to a teenager who just got their first job? I make $10 an hour and I worked 20 hours. Why is my check not $200? Yeah, we'll discuss basic tips for that discussion and go a little beyond just basics. Sometimes even payroll people have a hard time finding and explaining all of the elements on pay stubs. So try to put yourself in the non-payroll employee's place. There can be a lot of information crammed on that sheet of paper or screen. So giving your employees a little tutorial on how to read your paycheck can really be helpful. Plus, it can ease your burden too. And deductions. Deductions come in every shape and size, and they can be very hard to understand. So we're going to talk about how you can help employees grasp this concept. And finally, we're going to look at some things you can share with your employees that will be of tremendous benefit to them. W-2 information, Social Security information, COBRA and FMLA information, Affordable Care Act, unemployment, and some other areas that payroll touches and can assist with. One of the first teams that a new hire meets at your company is likely to be payroll or HR requesting payroll information. The new hire is given a large packet of papers or a set of screens to complete online so that the employer can capture all of the information necessary to pay the employee and report his or her taxes correctly. So let's look at some of those to start off. Your employees may look to you for help if they need it with Social Security cards. Filling out an I-9 is not something that most folks do every day, so that takes some explaining, as do tax forms. How old were your children before they stopped calling you to ask how to fill those out? Now, the majority of your new hires will have a valid Social Security card, and they will not have any problems or questions. And just because there is someone who does not, does not mean that there is a problem, so don't jump to any conclusions. With identity theft such a hot topic today, when you ask to make a copy of a Social Security card, you will no doubt get questioned by someone. So explain to them that you need a copy only for tax reporting purposes and that you are legally entitled to keep that copy in their personnel file. And when you do get that rare case where someone does not have a Social Security card, it will help you out if you have a supply of Forms SS5 on hand, or if you can direct the employees to the Social Security website, www.ssa.gov, or if you know the address of your local Social Security office. You can't apply for them, but you can point employees in the right direction. And the same goes for employees who need to change their Social Security card. Names change, and Social Security cards must do the same. That same Form SS5 is what those employees need too. Remind those employees to destroy their old cards. Remember identity theft. Explain that name and number mismatches are bad for both the employee and the employer because both of your tax filings could get rejected in the case of name and number mismatch. To help employers make sure that people they hire are not illegal aliens, new hires must prove their identity and their right to work in the United States. Form I-9 is the tool employers must use to do this, and it requires that you look at certain types of documentation provided by your new hires. You are not allowed to tell employees which documents to provide as long as they provide documents that are on the approved list and those documents appear legitimate and are not expired. But your employees are entitled to help when they fill out the I-9. They can request a translator and/or a preparer to help them complete the form. And employers must make the form instructions available to employees when they complete the I-9 form. Mommy, I've got one of those tax papers. What do I put on it? Yeah, Mommy can help, but payroll mom can't. The best you can do is explain to employees that this is an important form, probably the most important form they will fill out for you. And it determines how much federal income tax will be withheld from their checks. Stress its importance. Let them know if they don't fill one out that you must withhold the maximum the law allows. While you can't tell them how to fill out the lines on the form, you can give them the basics. You can explain that lower numbers of withholding allowances and a single marital status usually mean higher per period withholding and maybe a bigger refund. But be careful that you make no promises and speak in general terms. Now, to help you stay prepared for Form W-4 questions that you can't give advice on, keep IRS Publication 505 in your toolkit. That is the Tax Withholding and Estimated Tax Guide. And yes, it's an IRS publication, but it's better than nothing at all for an employee with questions. Or you can direct employees to the National Payroll Week website. There they will find a W-4 assistant that they can click on, and that will help them do test calculations to better judge how to complete Form W-4. It's very friendly and easy for a non-payroll person to use that W-4 assistant. One bit of advice you may want to share is with employees who claim exempt on Form W-4. Simply tell them that while you can't tell them how to fill out the form, they may want to investigate that because you just don't want them to get into any trouble with the IRS. That will get their attention. You and I may know that it's really very rare for someone to truly be exempt from federal income taxes. But your new hires, especially very young ones, just don't know what that means. Are they truly exempt and they're not planning to file a tax return? Or are they trying to say that they just don't want federal income tax withheld from their pay? Because those are two very different things, and one of them is not handled by claiming exempt. Also, tell them that when they claim exempt, they will always have to file a new Form W-4 every year. That may change their mind. Let employees know that they can make changes to the W-4. Now, I know that sometimes they go wild and they change them way too often. But if they complain that they had to pay taxes or that they got a really big refund and they wish they got that money spread out every pay period, let them know that they should change their W-4. And just like that Social Security card, life change events probably mean they need a new W-4. Change in marital status, change in number of allowances like new babies. Those things probably mean your employees need to revise their W-4 forms. It seems like it should go without saying, but tell your employees that these forms they're filling out in their packet are legal forms and may have to be presented in an audit, so they should use ink. Also, they should not write in changes, and they should not strike out or mark through lines. It's okay to just ask for a new form if they make a mistake. Otherwise, the form will not be accepted. And until an accepted form is completed, withholding will be at the maximum allowed. While Form W-4 really does not have a spot to write it in, it is illegal to request that a flat dollar amount of federal tax or a certain percentage of wages be withheld. However, there is a line where employees can request that an additional amount of withholding be taken. And 41 states have income tax, and many of them have their own version of the federal Form W-4, which your employees will also need to complete. Also, if you live in an area where there are local taxes, employees may need to fill out those local forms too. show them the money. That's really why they are there anyway. So how are you going to get the employees money to them? They will need to provide you with very specific information related to things they don't know a lot about, like ABA routing numbers and bank account numbers. So be prepared to help them and ask for pictures of things like voided checks so you can get that specific information in a clear form. So they got hired and they started working and things are going great until they get paid. Then you may have to explain the difference between gross and net to someone who got their first paycheck. And they question you, why is my check not my hours times my rate? They may not understand that employers must withhold Social Security tax and Medicare tax and income taxes to go from that gross to their take-home or net pay. The federal taxes that we payroll professionals take for granted can come as quite a shock to a youngster or someone who is not familiar with U.S. taxes. So you may have to explain Social Security and Medicare and income tax and other deductions that are subtracted from gross pay, which results in net pay. And keep in mind that we could go on for days here on this screen if we got too specific for each of your industries. So what we have here is just a very high-level example. And something else I want to spend just a minute on is very important. Another concept for employees to understand is exempt and non-exempt. The basic rule is salaried employees who do not get overtime are exempt, and hourly employees who do get overtime are non-exempt. But there's actually more to that your employees need to know. In order to protect your employees' exempt and non-exempt statuses, they need to understand that job duties actually define these status codes. Your job descriptions should be set up so that exempt workers are performing duties that qualify them as exempt, and they should stick to their job descriptions. Likewise, non-exempt employees should also stick to the duties outlined in their job descriptions so as to protect their status. If a Department of Labor audit were to take place, the auditor could interview employees and ask what duties they are performing. If they are performing duties that fall outside the definition of their assigned job description, then your company is running a huge risk. You could be fined and assessed penalties, and it could be very ugly. So explaining the concept of exempt and non-exempt to your employees is critical. Depending on your industry, there will be other factors that you'll have to explain to employees, like tips. Tips has a whole world of its own, as does piecework. Shift premium and overtime can be confusing. Commissions and bonuses often involve convoluted calculations. However, what I find interesting is that once an employee has worked in one of these industries for even a short amount of time, they're usually able to calculate what their pay should be faster than even the computer can. When that employee, particularly the new hire, gets the first pay stub, it has a lot of information, and it's understandable that they may need help reading it. Gross pay will be on that stub somewhere, and then all of those taxes will be shown as deductions being subtracted from gross. Remind the employee that their Form W-4 that they filled out told you how much federal tax to withhold. Stress to the employees that it's important that they review their pay stub and confirm their Social Security number. They want to make sure their retirement money goes to their account. Confirm their address. They want to make sure that their W-2 is mailed to the right address. I know that some employers even furnish a copy of an example check to new hires, or they'll post a frequently asked question sheet about payroll on their intranet. A lot of Americans don't know where their payroll tax deductions go. They don't realize that the money they contribute from their checks each pay period is helping to run the country. It goes to build and maintain roads and schools and federal buildings and parks, to finance branches of the military, and services that support the country. So this is something that you can share with your employees also. They may not understand Social Security tax. It's withheld from their checks so that American workers can afford living and medical expenses later in life, especially when they retire and no longer earn a paycheck. That's why it's very important that the Social Security number these new hires give the employer is correct. Otherwise, their deductions are going to someone else's Social Security account, and the money will not be there for them when they retire. They also may not be aware that FICA tax, Medicare tax, or FICA, is only withheld on the first $127,200 in 2017, or the first $128,700 in 2018. Lots of folks don't know that. That's something you can share with your employees. We've already said that 41 states have state income tax, but some states also have other state taxes like state disability tax, state health insurance tax, state workers' comp tax, and some others. So you might share that with your new employees. Deductions. Now there is a difference between voluntary deductions and involuntary deductions. Your employees will consider all of those taxes as involuntary deductions, but there may be other deductions that are involuntary, like court-ordered deductions. These might include tax levies, child support orders, garnishments, student loans, bankruptcies. Once the employer receives an order to withhold for any of these items, they must comply. And they must continue to comply until they receive a formal order to stop withholding. We went over this in great detail in the Garnishments Best Practices webinar. Now this goes for child support orders, tax levies, anything court ordered. Never stop because you think the child has turned 18, or because you think the debt has been paid off, or never stop because the employee tells you so. Wait for the stop order. So, on to voluntary deductions, the things that the employees have elected on their own to participate in. The more common ones may be insurance plans and 401k, and both of these may be part of your cafeteria plan. Maybe that also includes flex spending or health savings accounts. Perhaps you allow charity contributions, union dues, uniforms, laundry. This list really is endless. But some voluntary deductions are pre-tax and some are not. They're post-tax. So you should explain the benefits of pre-tax deductions to your employees and let them know it will save them a little bit of money if they subtract the deductions before their taxable wages are calculated, when that's an option. And we're going to wrap up today by looking at a few other miscellaneous things that are important for your employees to know about, like the Form W-2, the Earned Income Credit, My Social Security, Workers' Comp Insurance, FMLA, Health Insurance and the Affordable Care Act, COBRA, and Employee Assistance Plans. And this list is by no means exhaustive, but we've chosen these to scratch the surface. Most folks are familiar with Form W-2, but there may be some information that you can share with your employees that's new to them. Tell employees that this is their wage and tax statement. It goes to both the IRS and the Social Security Administration. The IRS uses it when the employees file their taxes, and the Social Security Administration uses it to credit dollars to the employee's Social Security account. Everybody knows that by January 31st, every employer that they work for will issue a W-2 to every employee for every year that they work. It shows their taxable wages, tips, and other compensation. Tell the employees, do not substitute your final pay stub for your Form W-2. Because a lot of times employees don't understand that the final pay stub and the Form W-2 do not contain the same information. Did you know that if you have an employee who has no federal income tax withheld, now this is not because they claimed exempt, but because their wages and their marital status and their withholding allowances took them to a bracket where they had no federal tax withheld. In those cases, you must tell them about the Earned Income Credit. If you didn't know that, that is true. The Earned Income Credit is explained on the back side of Form W-2. Now, while employees can no longer claim the Earned Income Credit and get an advanced credit with each pay period during the year, they can still claim the credit on their personal return at the end of the year if they qualify. My Social Security is a great tool to share with your employees. They can go to the Social Security website and create an account where they can keep up with their deposits and request a new Social Security card and even see estimates of future retirement benefits. So this is something really nice to share with your employees. It's a good tool. I realize that no employer wants employees to get injured on the job or to have to file a workers' comp claim, But employees do need to understand that workers' comp insurance is there to protect them in case something does happen on the job. And they should be informed that workers' comp will pay medical bills and also cover some income benefits if the employee has to be out of work. FMLA is one of those acronyms that payroll and HR people use, kind of like a code language. But the Family and Medical Leave Act just makes it easier for employees to take time off in certain circumstances. Now, first, FMLA only applies to employers with 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius of the work site. But when FMLA applies, an employee can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to deal with his or her own serious illness or that of a child, spouse, or parent, or the birth or adoption of a child, including a foster child, or an emergency due to a spouse, child, or parent on active military duty, or notified of a call to active military duty. And there are other nuances specific to FMLA, and your organization may have its own special rules surrounding FMLA too, so that's something to explain to employees. You and I know the drill on the Affordable Care Act, but your employees do not, and chances are they find it all very confusing. So here are 3 bullet points you can share that will give them the basics. Employers with at least 50 full-time employees are mandated to offer employees affordable, minimum essential health care coverage. Employers and health insurance companies will issue forms to employees providing proof of offer of coverage and health care coverage. If an individual is not offered coverage by an employer, the individual must get coverage on their own through an insurance carrier or through the health insurance marketplace or exchange. Otherwise, the individual will be fined. COBRA may actually be a code word that your employees are familiar with. I think a lot of people know that it's possible to continue to purchase insurance coverage after you leave a job. But this is definitely something that you need to explain to your employees to make sure they're clear on your company policy. And employee assistance plans are grand things if you offer them. If you do, be certain to share this with your employees because it makes your company look like a hero for offering these benefits to help with education or adoption or legal help or any other number of services. We want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you've learned some payroll information that you can share with your employees. But what we really hope is that these things will give you more ideas on additional ways to educate your employees, whether it's onboarding new hires or tutoring employees who've been with you for a long time, so that your life will be a little easier and a little more question-free. Please be on the lookout for more of our educational webinars soon, and we hope you have an Optimum day.